Welcome to another episode of Boots on the Ground, where we discuss Israel's politics, wars, and identity. Today I'm joined by Maurice Hirsch, who is the former chief military prosecutor for Judea and Samaria. And we're going to be discussing the current scandal around Yifat Yerushalmi, the military advocate general, her resignation, the leaking of videos, and everything around that whole story. We're going to get into it because even I don't completely understand what's going on. But before we get into today's episode, I want to thank our partners here at the Jerusalem Media Group. And as always, our sponsors, BeThereIsrael.com. BeThereIsrael.com provides live video streaming services for all your events here in Israel. So even if you can't be here physically in person at the event, they can stream it live to you anywhere in the world. BeThereIsrael.com. All right, Maurice. What's your position today? What do you deal with on a daily basis? What are you doing now? You're no longer in your position within the military prosecution. So what are you doing now? And then let's get into this whole scandal going on.
Okay. So I retired from the military now almost 8.5 years ago. And now at the moment I am the director of the Initiative for Palestinian Authority Accountability and Reform in the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. We're trying to understand where to go with the Palestinian Authority. We know that it's an organization that promotes terror, incites terror, rewards terror. There has to be something else. And so we're working on basically developing the alternatives to the Palestinian Authority as something which is necessary for Israel's national security, for the future of the Jewish people.
All right. So you're already invited back to have a whole discussion about that, because that is something that we would really like to discuss and get into. But for now, there's a scandal around the current military advocate, or former military advocate general. She resigned. She's currently sitting in jail for leaking video footage or something that happened at a military prison in State Taiman. Give us the facts. Let's go back to the beginning. Give us the facts. Walk us through step by step what got us to today, and then we'll discuss it. We'll open up each piece and discuss it in a bigger way.
Okay, so I'll try and walk you through as much as I know of the facts with a little bit of my own commentary as we're going along, because it really is necessary in order to understand the position. So we have an event at State Taiman. This is a prison which is set up after the October 7 massacre. It's one of these stop points where terrorists are arrested in the Gaza Strip. Okay. They're brought out of the Gaza Strip. They're brought to State Taiman, where they undergo initial interrogation to see who we're dealing with, right? When you have the October 7 massacre, you have thousands of these genocidal terrorists storming, invading Israel, murdering, raping, butchering, torturing, killing babies. And suddenly you see the terrorist in Gaza and you've arrested him. You bring him back to State Taiman. You have to first identify him. Okay. See what his connection is to the massacre, if anything. See what his connection is to any other form of terrorism. Do we know him? Do we know what he's been involved in? And trying to establish exactly who this terrorist is. It's someone who most likely was holding a gun of some kind when he met the IDF forces. So he is a terrorist. And now it's just establishing what type of a terrorist he is. And that really was the function of State Taiman. Now, what happens at State Taiman is complex, because you're bringing in some of the people who actually participated in the October 7 massacre. Some of the people who were arrested on the day of the massacre itself, right? Not everyone, not all the terrorists managed to escape back to Gaza. Not all of them were, and I will say this clearly and without any shame whatsoever, not all of them were killed on the spot as they should have been. But some of them were arrested. Some of them were taken into custody, and now they're in State Taiman. And there's all types of forces that are now looking after them. And a complaint comes up from one of the prisoners. One of the prisoners makes there's a rule. Many years ago, I dealt with a report from UNICEF, the UN Children's Organization. Basically, they accused me of committing war crimes. As a lawyer? As a lawyer, for prosecuting Palestinian minors for murdering people. You know, like the terrorist who murdered Ari Kalker, because he was a minor and I prosecuted him, that made me a war criminal in the eyes of UNICEF. You can't imagine these things like Auschwitz gas chambers and Maurice prosecuting the murder of Ari Kalker. In the eyes of UNICEF, it was the same thing. So one of the things that came up as part of that discussion and part of their report was that, well, where are the medical reports of all of the prisoners? What happens if a prisoner complains that he's been in some way abused by a soldier? And so I walked them through the rules and regulations. What happens is if a prisoner comes and makes a complaint that he needs to see a doctor, that he tells the doctor that he has been some way assaulted by a soldier, the doctor is then required to report that. So you have a terrorist who makes a complaint against a soldier. This then basically automatically brings about the opening of an investigation. And this is basically what happened at State Eman. You have a terrorist who makes a complaint, it goes through the channels, and an investigation is opened. This then becomes quite a subject for discussion behind closed doors. What do you do with that? What do you do in time of war with a complaint against a soldier or a group of soldiers that they've been involved in an attack on a prisoner? Do you give that some type of a leeway? Is that acceptable? Is that something that we do? And the answer is no. So you have the criminal investigation that is opened, and part of the criminal investigation is gathering the materials that you can around, including the video footage of what you could see from the cameras at State Eman. And then you go to the stage of an open investigation. What do I mean open investigation? It's the stage when you see the first openly discernible action of the law enforcement agencies against the people they think are suspects. What happens usually? I mean, we've all seen it on television. When the police are going to get the mafia or whatever it is, they wait outside, they hide in their little vans, and when you have the right moment, you all storm the restaurant, whatever it is, and you arrest the suspects. That's law enforcement. What unfortunately happened in our case was that the military police, not the military advocate general, the military police decided that they are going to arrest the soldiers who they believed were involved in the assault at State Eman. They weren't going to arrest them when they came out of their bases. These soldiers were on reserve duty. They were there all the time, 24/7. Right. They weren't going anywhere. But the military police nonetheless decided we're going to go and arrest them in the middle of the day with a large military police force, and we're going to show that we're here.
We're going to do it on camera.
This turned out to be a massive disaster because it was caught on camera. The military police, and really I have no words to describe my disgust for the head of the military police, and specifically for the head of the military police investigation department. This is a colonel and a brigadier general who made the decision to send their soldiers they sent with face masks, because they were afraid that the soldiers would possibly be recognized while walking on the street by their homes, and so they looked after them. They didn't care about the soldiers who were the suspects, or they were arresting. This was probably one of the most disgusting scenes that we've ever seen. Yes, you need to enforce the law. Yes, when there is a complaint that illegal force has been used against a prisoner, you need to investigate. You do not go and arrest Israeli soldiers as if they are the worst terrorists on earth. They were good people. They were doing their job. They weren't running away. They were in the same place looking after the same genocidal terrorists. And this could all have been handled differently. Once the video was once that video became public of the manner in which the arrest was carried out, there was, if you recall, tremendous outcry in Israel. Tremendous outcry.
I remember that.
Again, the country doesn't really mind if you enforce the law, but don't treat Israeli soldiers like they're terrorists. And that's what the military police did. Tremendous outcry. And the person who took really the brunt of all of the criticism was Major General Ifat Tomer Yerushalmi, the military advocate general. For many, many years, there's been complaints against the MAG, the Military Advocate General's Corps, that they are too quick to indict soldiers for offences related to operative actions. We're not talking about the drug dealers, which we have. I was once the head of the AWOL prosecution. We have lots of soldiers who run away, draft dodgers. No one cares about that. But when you come to
the gray area where operation, what you're doing as a combat soldier in combat is it's outside. If I did what I did in my regular life, what I do in combat, I'd be breaking a whole list of laws. You would not want to live next door to me.
It's exactly that. It's that combat situation where you see a terrorist coming towards you. You cannot now start thinking, well, how far exactly is he away? Is the knife that he's holding strong enough to murder me? The answer is you pick up your gun and you shoot him. And that's okay. Because that's what happens with terrorists. They get shot. But then you get into a gray area of, well, what happens if the terrorist had already been shot and you then go and make sure that he's dead? You'd actually, in some way, incapacitated him on the way. When is enough to incapacitate, or when do you kill? So that's a whole question in and of itself. And there's a less of a gray area. Obviously, you cannot abuse prisoners. And so when you have a claim like that, that's something that has to be investigated. It has to be, if it's true, it should be prosecuted. And so Yifat Yerushalmi is now taking all of the flack for a decision that she didn't make. Yes, the MAG Corps had indicted soldiers before. There is this general antagonism towards many of the lawyers, definitely law enforcement lawyers in the country, specifically to the MAG, because of these instances of law enforcement and putting in indictments around operational activities. But she's now taking flack because that's the history, again, for a decision that she didn't make. She then makes the worst decision possible that will bring us to today.
Okay.
She decides that since the entire legal law enforcement operation of the army is under attack, since the claim is that this whole investigation is based solely on the complaint of a terrorist, and there's no other evidence, so the story goes, she decides that she's going to leak to the press a video which ostensibly shows and proves that the soldiers were involved in an assault on the terrorist. Okay. The video then goes to an Israeli journalist called Guy Peleg. He, so I assume, I don't know this for a fact, I'm not sure exactly who of the different players, I assume that it wasn't the MAG, then edits the video in a very, very systematic way to show to the greatest extent possible that the soldiers were involved in an assault, open and close brackets. The video doesn't really show any type of assault. It certainly doesn't show what Guy Peleg claimed at the time, that the prisoner had been in some way sexually abused or assaulted. That isn't in the video. You can't find that. And I have these battles on X with all of these pro-terrorists who say, well, the army admitted that there was a abuse and there's even a video. I said, okay, so show me the video. Even the edited video
doesn't show that at all.
Doesn't show the proof of any type of misconduct necessarily, and certainly not of the misconduct that they were alleging. Now, once she does this, everything goes wrong. Everything goes wrong. Releasing the video to the public does not in any way, shape or form reduce the criticism of the MAG, reduce the criticism of the law enforcement agencies. The public just gets more annoyed because the video doesn't show what they're trying to claim, and yet and now it certainly doesn't explain why masked Israeli soldiers came in the middle of the day to arrest other Israeli soldiers. That's just a travesty. But that was the least of her problems, really the least of her problems. The minute this video was released, it became the darling of the anti-Israel, Jew-hating, terror-supporting international community. Every UN flunky, Francesca Albanese, this really Jew-hating, vile specimen, takes it up as a cause célèbre. And here, even the Israeli army admits that Israeli soldiers abused a Palestinian terrorist. Not true, but that's the claim. And really, this becomes an international, global disaster for Israel. Everyone now, I deal a lot with the UN reports as well as in one of my capacities. And you see this argument, and you see the reference to the video in every single one of these reports. They could be reporting about global warming in Guatemala. Israeli soldiers abused a Palestinian while he was under arrest. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. It's always there. It's everywhere. And it will be there forever. Because that's the way these people work. The truth doesn't matter to them. So once this now explodes, there is then a push from an Israeli victims organization called the Choose Life Forum, Bocharim B'Chaim, that I serve also as the legal advisor in one of my other capacities. And they put in a petition they ask that an investigation be opened as to who leaked the video. At this stage, we don't know. And their request is refused, and then they put in a petition to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
The Supreme Court hears the petition, and then looks at the government and says, "Well, what's your problem? The video was clearly leaked. Why don't you set up some type of mechanism to investigate?" At this stage, the MAG should have realized that this has gone too far. She should have put her hand up and said, I was the one who leaked the video. It was a mistake of judgment. She would have got a slap on the wrist and everyone would have moved on. But instead, she and a group of senior officers around her, now it appears that there were 8 to 10 other officers in the military advocate general who all knew that she was the one who had leaked the video. And they all kept quiet. No one said anything. The proceedings in the Supreme Court continue on, and the decision is made to appoint the deputy MAG to investigate. Like, this is the cat who's coming to investigate the other cat who ate the cream. And it's not clear whether the deputy MAG actually knew that the woman sitting in the room next to him was the one who leaked it. Her spokesman was the one who was involved. The chief military prosecutor for the IDF, a colonel in the army, he was also involved. And the deputy MAG says, I was unable to establish who leaked the video. So he's either, and I apologize, I've known him for years, and I apologize for the harshness of my next comment, but he's either a naive idiot, or he knew as well, and he was part of the cover-up. I don't believe that there's any other option. It would appear that as a part of the investigation, he investigated everyone else, apart from the members of
the senior group
of the MAG and the senior group, and no one at all from the MAG, even though the MAG had access. Officers like the head of the prosecution for the operational affairs had access to all of the materials. They were somehow not questioned at all. It was just a massive debacle, really, truly. And so, but for a year, they managed to get away with it. For a year, they managed to persuade everyone that they'd done this very, very thorough investigation and that they just couldn't find the right person who had leaked it. And then suddenly, the spokeswoman of an officer in the MAG, the spokesperson of the unit, who worked together with the MAG in leaking this specifically to the one journalist. In the army, every couple of years you change positions. Right? That was one of the things that I truly loved about the army. Every 2-3 years, you're moving on. I have ADHD. Like
the rest of us.
I can't sit in the same position for years and years and years. And so for myself, it was amazing to go through different disciplines through my military career, different positions. And so she had finished her position as spokesman, and that made the decision that she would be going to at least to be a candidate to be appointed for as a military judge. And she goes to take a polygraph test. Obviously, a judge is someone who is about to, if he's appointed, she's appointed, about to be exposed to secret information that's provided to a judge as part of any arrest procedure, let alone other proceedings which are held before the court. And so you need to make sure that she's honest, that she doesn't have a record of committing criminal offenses, of leaking documents. And suddenly this whole story comes out because she fails on her polygraph. That's how it comes out. Not because anyone suddenly stood up and said, you know what? I've been lying to you for so long.
No one grew a conscience, it sounds
No one
like.
grew a conscience. No one suddenly became honest. And so now you have this situation that just blowing up in everyone's face. The MAG is suddenly called in to the chief of staff, where there she's told, Yifat, we know that it was you. We've been told that it's you. We've done. Your assistant already failed the polygraph. She's already been questioned, and she's already implicated you. That's when Yifat Omer resigns. She finally fesses up and resigns. And then the next day she's 2 days long. She's gone. She's disappeared. Her car is left with the switch on at a beach by a cliff. She leaves what appears to be a suicide note, and suddenly the whole country is looking for her. What happened to her? Now, this is a bad event, but I mean, God forbid you should be in that situation. And I am sure that really when you're going from being the top of the legal system to being
the bottom,
one of the worst one of the worst criminals that did irreparable damage to Israel's security, to Israel's name, and you're a major general. She, to her credit, she had been an excellent officer all the way through her service, really excelling. That is how she became the first woman head of the MAG Corps. She was an excellent lawyer. And I don't believe that she's an evil person. I disagree with pretty much most of her agenda, with her legal decisions, but I don't believe she's an evil person. And here she made a disastrous decision, which sometimes, as they say, in a second you can make a decision which brings you the world to come, good. And in a second you can make a decision which takes you on the path to hell. And unfortunately hers was the latter. And so that's where we are. Excuse me. That's really where we are now. We're in this situation where she's under investigation. The top brass of the MAG are all under investigation. At the moment, the only one who isn't under arrest is the military advocate general, who never. He was just the victim of everything that was going on around him. This is a guy who just a week before this blew up was promoted to the rank of brigadier general. But he's such a nebuch, he doesn't understand what's happening in the room next to him. He's not privy to this criminal conspiracy that's going on. No one actually tells him. He's like a mushroom, just put him in the dark and everything will be okay. But he's being promoted. Question mark why? But that's other question. And now you have, again, it's possibly a harsh comment, but now the little mice are coming out of their holes. Says the chief military prosecutor, while he's under interrogation now. Well, I told the deputy mag that I wanted to speak to him about the leak, but he never got back to me. Dude, you're the head of the prosecution. You're a colonel in the IDF. Truth, honesty, values, morality should be the guiding spirit of everything you do.
And even at the bottom of the army, if the guy on top of you is not listening, you just go above their head.
Exactly.
Even I know that.
Exactly.
Even that's the basics of how the Israeli army functions.
Once really the level of the destruction that this caused became clear, every single one of those people should have stepped up and said, we did it. It's I was speaking to some of my ex officers over the last few days, and one of them reminded me of the speech that I used to give every time I took a command of a unit. It was the same speech. A few different things. Firstly, this is the army. There is no cuddling and kissing here. I don't want to see that. That's not my army. You want to have a private life? That's there. Okay. In the army, there's boys, there's girls. The two don't mix. The second thing is honesty. If you make a mistake, the first thing you need to do is to admit that you made a mistake. Sometimes that will have consequences, and sometimes it's things that can be fixed. But if you're not honest, you're going to lose the trust of everyone around you, and no one will ever work with you again. I will never work with you again. You will no longer stay in my unit. And thank God I only had to get rid of one officer like that, who I believed was a systematic liar in my 19 years of service. And this should have been their guiding light. And unfortunately, instead of really defending what should have been really the jewel in the crown of the IDF, which is the MAG, this is a professional unit. This is really a unit that is possibly the top of the legal system in Israel. Apart from myself, obviously, I was the exception to the rule. Really tremendous geniuses who have studied in university before they came into the army. They have tremendous grades. They are really the innovators of everything that's going on. And this should be really the jewel in the crown. And unfortunately, instead of being the jewel in the crown, they've turned it into a criminal conspiracy where the truth doesn't matter. You can try and hide everything that you've done, criminal acts as well, even in a group of people, and everybody looks one after the other. And that is something which the MAG, that's not the MAG that I knew. That's not the MAG that I would have liked to have been a part of.
All right, so before we get into the analysis and more of trying to understand the deeper implications of the entire situation, and also how we would fix, even how we would restore confidence in that system, I think is how we'll finish. But before then, we were running through the events that happened. So it was already a few days ago that the military advocate general, she left a note in her car. She went to the beach. We couldn't find her for a few hours. And at least what's being reported is that was all a cover for her to basically make her cell phone disappear, which has all the evidence and implicates probably many other people in this process with it. She makes this phone disappear. And then she was using her emotional distress state to cover it up. Like, she considered suicide, and then she changed her mind, but in the process she lost her phone, which gets into now destroying evidence in an ongoing investigation. Where is she now? What do we know now? Give us just bring us up to date to today when we're recording this, because again, by the time we publish this in a day or two from now, who knows what's going to be. With the speed of things are changing here in Israel, we can't keep up. And then we'll get into understanding what the implications of this entire situation are and how we can move forward from it.
Okay, so at the moment, Yifat is still under arrest and under interrogation. The country is looking for her cell phone. She's giving whatever story she's giving to the investigators as to what happened with her phone. She says that she lost it on the beach. If I may, Ari, just take myself out of the situation, the discussion of who she is, what she's done. Let's discuss the telephone, right? If I'm a defense lawyer and I have a client who's committed an offense like this, and I can't tell my client to destroy evidence because that's a criminal offense. But if I ask my client, do you think that you have anything in your possession that could make your situation worse? That would probably be something which you should consider what to do with. And as they say in Hebrew, v'hamevin yavin. And anyone who understands that question will then... Now, obviously, this is a far cry away from the morals, the values that I said should be the epitome of every officer in the army, certainly of a major general. But now she's in a different situation. Now she is a suspect in a criminal offense that she has openly confessed to. And she has to think, well, if my cell phone has additional information that could further incriminate me, or and if it gets seized, it could be much worse, or do I possibly consider having another account of interfering with an investigation, of destroying evidence on my rap sheet, on my indictment, which won't really add that much of severity to the crime. And I have to think for my own best interest.
Which is the best way out?
What's the best way out? I would say as an officer in the army, your obligation is to come forward, to come straight, to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, really, so help you God. But when you're talking about your individual status, you're now no longer that on that pillar. Now you're just one of the last organized crime criminals. You think of your own best interest, and I believe that that's what what we're seeing there. I doubt that we'll find her cell phone in any usable manner. I would hope that there are alternative methods to at least take or find some of the information that was on her phone. There is maybe one outside chance of finding her phone, but that would be really invoking very special capabilities that I don't think the state would like to expose at the moment. So we won't get into that.
We're going to get into that here anyways.
We won't get into that at all. But really, that's where we're standing. I think there's no question that she will be, I think, indicted for, at the very least, a breach of trust for lying to the courts, and that will be a very unfortunate end to a very otherwise illustrious career. She will potentially be stripped of her entire rank. She will be potentially sent home without any pension. This was a big event for her, and therefore doing as much as she can to mitigate the circumstances, I don't think is entirely unreasonable from her personal stance. So really that's where we are. In the meantime, the Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff have appointed a new MAG, someone who will come in and try and really stabilize this this whole situation that's really gone through a tremendous earthquake. Right, this is an earthquake, and so how does he do that? Who does he see around him? What does he do with the people who were involved / knew about the fact that she was the one who leaked the video and did nothing to come forward? Is that a criminal offense in and of itself? That's a question. If you know of a crime that's been committed, to what extent do you have a positive duty to go and report on it? Question, put it out there. It's not a simple situation. And I think most people would say you don't necessarily have that type of an obligation, but that's not the standards that are applied to officers in the army. Certainly not to senior officers in the army, and so that's something which within the army itself there are specifically army offences.
Right.
Conduct unbecoming is not an offence that you have in normal civilian life. What is conduct unbecoming for a civilian? You do whatever you do. That's what it is. A soldier, certainly an officer in the army, there's a special offence of conduct unbecoming. So that's something which will have to be taken into account. What do you do now with all of the people, the high-ranking officers, these positions that are suddenly open? How do you promote people upwards? What do you do with the deputy JAG who was just promoted to be a brigadier general, but was clearly either part of it or so out of and detached from the unit that he didn't even know what was going on.
So I'll ask you a more direct question. Let's say you can sit down with the person who is now appointed as the military advocate general, and you can give him advice on two ideas. One, what should he be doing internally within the military advocate general's office to stabilize the unit, bring back the standards that you're talking about? What would he do internally? And on the flip side, what would he do externally? What would he do in the media? What kind of interviews would he be giving? What would he be publishing? What would he do externally to give the confidence back of soldiers like myself that this is a functioning part of the army that is actually there to defend me and not just throw me under the bus when it's convenient for them? What two pieces of advice would you give him?
So internally, I would recommend purge. Purge. Anyone who had any type of involvement in this file can no longer continue on in the army. They need to leave immediately. Those who had positive knowledge within that small group all need to be indicted for conduct unbecoming. They all need to be stripped of their ranks, and they all need to be thrown out. I don't think the country will accept anything else. It's a harsh entrance, but that's how you restore, how I believe that he should restore some of the trust in the unit. It's going to take years. It's going to take years and years to restore that trust that was just breached. But I think showing that there is zero tolerance for any type of involvement in this type of activity, it has to be a very public act, a very quick act to show that this is unacceptable, that this will be the consequences for anyone who even thinks about this in the future. That's the deterrent effect. That's what law enforcement's about. Some of it is punishment, some of it is deterrent. As they say again in Hebrew, leman yir'u v'yira'u, that you can see and you'll be afraid. That's what I would suggest that he needs to do. Any type of cover up, any type of acceptance of this type of behavior means that for the rest of the army, that's the new low standard that you've set. If you don't expect full honesty from your officers, then don't ever expect it from the rest of the army. So that's what he needs to do internally, and to make sure that this is a very, very clear situation. I would say even that he should go as far as requesting that every single one of the higher levels of the MAG Corps, from major upwards, all undergo a polygraph test. Every single one of them now is unfortunately a suspect.
There's a level of doubt now, you're saying, on everybody involved, and in order to clean it, you need a totally swift cleaning of the house.
Exactly that. For the rest of the army, he needs to now go out of his way to show, I've done the purge. You can now trust these people implicitly because we've done what needed to be done. The army, people like the officers in my unit or my ex-unit, the prosecution for Judea and Samaria, we work hand in hand with the Shin Bet. We see, and I saw, security information, intelligence information of the highest level. Exposing that level could endanger thousands of people potentially. Could ruin capabilities, expose capabilities. You need to know, everybody needs to know, that we can work with that unit, that we can trust that unit, that we can trust that no one there is going to leak any information. And that needs to be part of really the course to rehabilitating the unit. And it needs to be very vocal. It needs to be very aggressive, because I believe that is the only way that the rest of the army will be able to then again trust and put its trust in the hands of the MAG. Externally, there's a whole story. Like part of the considerations of Yifat Tomer were pure, when she leaked the video, were purely legal. Right? This is based on a lie, clearly a lie, that has been perpetuated by the Israeli legal system for many, many years. She's part of that lie. It's not an open lie. It's not a false truth. It's part of a false conception. Right? What am I talking about?
No, that's where I was going. Where are you going with this?
This is like off the charts now. The idea is like this. Israel is at war, right? There is a requirement that if there are crimes that are committed during war, that you prosecute for those crimes. Okay. Because in the background, there's this institution called the International Criminal Court, right? And so there is an idea in the International Criminal Court. Israel isn't a member of the court, but Palestine is, and that then brings on jurisdiction. I'll talk about that just for a second in a minute. So her argument is, and all of these other fallacies that they've created, is that if we don't prosecute our own soldiers, then that will give rise to the jurisdiction of the ICC, of the International Criminal Court, because there's an idea that's called complementarity. If you don't prosecute,
we will.
Then we will step in. So what she says is, and this is part of the idea, the prosecution of the soldiers in State Eman, of those who are alleged or have been indicted for assault of the terrorist, is necessary in order to avoid prosecution in the ICC. Now, why do I say that that's a lie? Because they are all arguing that there is something that Israel can do to avoid the ICC interfering. That's a lie. The ICC is a monkey court. Monkey court. There is no law there. There is no justice there. In order to get involved in the situation in Israel, in order to get involved with the most just war against these genocidal terrorists, the court had to invent a state that doesn't exist. Members of the court can only be states. There is no state of Palestine. And therefore, how can they claim jurisdiction? If there's no state of Palestine, Israel isn't part of the court, then they have no jurisdiction. So they claim jurisdiction because Palestine, this non-existent Narnia that's somewhere to the right or to the east of Neverland, has joined the court. And they don't think there's any problem with that. And now go and argue that they're going to accept, having invented a state, a country that doesn't exist, they're now going to accept the fact that Israel prosecutes some soldiers in order to prevent jurisdiction. You're fooling yourselves. And I have been arguing that for years and years and years. And this is something which, unfortunately, they are part of that lie. They tell the Israeli public in order to scare the public. Well, if we don't prosecute, then the ICC will step in. The ICC will step in anyway. That's how they already asked for arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu. They'll do it anyway, no matter what you are saying. And the prosecutor in the court said it very clearly in one of his last responses to the court. He said, the only time we will not intervene is if there is an actual indictment for the very specific offense which we want to indict for. And we see that there is a conviction at the end. He won't accept an acquittal. I go, by the way, on for those specific soldiers that we're talking about, they are likely now to be acquitted.
I was going to ask that.
Because the terrorist who complained was released as part of the hostage release deals. So there's no complainant. The video shows nothing. There doesn't appear to be any other evidence, and so
in the end, the entire thing that brought this whole scandal out, the initial crime, which isn't really a crime, can't even be prosecuted at this point.
Can't even be prosecuted at this point. It's just an entire debacle from A to Z. It's something which really was that terrible mistake of judgment all the way along. Before you indict soldiers for this type of thing, you need to make sure that you have the evidence. You need to make sure that the terrorist comes to give, you're going to release him, comes to give early evidence. Where have you been for the last year? They've been fighting. They've been trying to push off the defense lawyers, explaining who released the video. The full video, by the way, so claim the defense lawyers, shows that before even the little bit of force that you see being used in the video by the IDF soldiers, before that happened, the terrorist had sexually abused one of the female prison guards, had then said to one of the other soldiers, in the same way as I murdered the 10 people on the 7th, I'm going to come back and murder your family as well. And possibly, and I don't excuse it, possibly the soldiers responded with a little bit more force than they should have. This is a situation which is unfortunate. It happens, and really, I don't believe it gets to the level of a criminal prosecution. You see that happening with law enforcement officers all over the world. When a suspect just pushes the wrong buttons, too much force is used, it doesn't result always in criminal prosecutions, and I doubt whether it should have on this instance either.
All right, so let's zoom out for a minute. Are there any implications on the greater legal system in Israel from this? We're at, right before this whole war broke out 2 years ago, all of Israel was deeply involved, either for or against, protesting for or against an entire reform package that was being presented for the entire judicial system in Israel. Taking that into account, when we look at the military prosecutor's office and all of the dishonesty, mismanagement, lower moral standards that we've been talking about this whole time, does that situation have any implications now on the bigger judicial system, both on a technical level? I don't really understand to this day whether the military advocate general responds to the chief of staff, responds to the legal advisor for the government, who her actual boss is, both on paper and in practicality. So does that situation have any greater effect on the larger judicial reality that Israel's in at the moment?
So to answer that question, I have to just go back a little bit and explain. And this was something which I think believe not necessarily everybody in Israel, and certainly not everybody who would possibly hear this podcast would understand. What was the judicial reform that was moving forward prior to October 7? The judicial reform was basically a battle between
branches of government.
The branches of the government. Who is the sovereign in the country? Is it the executive? Is it the government? Is it the legislature? Or is it the judiciary? Do you have really that separation of powers? To what extent can the Supreme Court strike down a law passed by the Knesset? We don't have a constitution here. Right. And so you don't have that constitutional really basis that could be used to declare a law passed by the Knesset unconstitutional. But that's something that the Supreme Court had adopted for itself over a very long period of time. They then said, well, not only do we have the right to strike down laws passed by the Knesset, we also have the right to sit in judicial review of every decision made by every minister in the government based on what we believe is the reasonableness clause. What is the reasonableness clause? Well, I, as a judge, think that the minister acted unreasonably. Why? Because I disagree with his decision. And therefore, we can strike that down, that decision as well. I'll give you an example of that. 2018, the then Minister of Defense decides that he doesn't want to allow a group of Palestinians into Israel on Memorial Day, Israel's Memorial Day. They're coming in to hold an alternative memorial service where they're going to mourn the deaths of terrorists together with Israelis. So decides Avigdor Lieberman, the then Minister of Defense, that terrorists and their hosts appeal to the Supreme Court, and the judges decide, you know what? Even though it's your jurisdiction, even though it's your power to decide whether they come in or not, we've decided that your decision was unreasonable. Who appointed you to do that? Was there a mistake of law? No. Did I do something that was ultra-virus? No. You just disagree with my decision, so I'm going to overturn it. And this was part of what was going on in the country, where the judiciary had taken for itself powers and authority that it doesn't have, because we don't have a constitution. It doesn't have them in law. It had invented its own mechanisms to ensure that they are sovereign over every decision made, and they can strike down the decisions just because they don't believe it was a reasonable decision. 3 judges who weren't democratically elected can say, you know what, Mr. Minister, we don't agree with your policies. Like, who asked you? That's not what judges are meant to do. Judges are meant to interpret the law. And so that was really the battle for power. And that battle for power was between a very old and established progressive elite and the rest of the country that had moved on. And that progressive elite was holding on for dear life, because they were realizing that the country no longer accepts their nonsense. And it was going to be changed by legislation. It was going to be changed because that's what the country wanted. The MAG, the Attorney General, were all part of that elite trying to hold on to their last clutches of power. The MAG, for example, Yifat Tomer, sent one of the only parts of the judicial reform that was passed was the cancellation of this reasonableness clause. Yifat Tomer then, I believe, sent one of the reserve officers in the MAG Corps to put in a petition to the Supreme Court against the Knesset by claiming that the change or the expunging this reasonableness clause will then somehow
affect us at the International Criminal Court.
Endanger soldiers before the International Criminal Court. You see, it all fits together into that little puzzle. When you have that warped conception, you then use that warped conception, that clutching to power, to then frighten everybody. To then say, you can't be sovereign as a Knesset, as a legislature, because we'll decide for you what we think is in the best interests of the country. You, Mr. Minister, we don't actually care what your policies are. We will decide what it's going to be. And that was the war that was going on in Israel between the small elite clutching onto power, and the rest of the country that says, you know what, we're done with that. We want to make our own decisions. We want ministers to be not only our elected officials, not only ministers in the government, but actually have the power to implement their policies
that we were elected for.
That's what they were elected for.
Okay. So, Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch, we're getting to the end. We can go on for hours. I want to sit here, but Unfortunately, most of our audience doesn't have the ability to listen for that long. I'm definitely inviting you back here. We have way more to talk about.
Thank you.
So we have one last question here at the end of every show. I'm going to give you a minute to think about the answer after I ask it. We ask everyone who comes on the show to share with us a thought that gives them optimism, what it is that they're looking forward to that gives them real confidence that the state of Israel and the Jewish people are headed to a bright and strong future. And while you think about
I don't need to think about it.
But I need a minute.
Okay.
I need a minute. So while you think about that answer, I want to once again say thank you to our partners here at the Jerusalem Media Group and to our sponsors at BeThereIsrael.com. BeThereIsrael.com provides live streaming services for all of your events here in Israel. So even if your friends, family, or audience can't be here in person, they can feel like they're at the event through BeThereIsrael.com's live streaming services. Now, Maurice, now that you've had a minute to think about that you didn't need, what is it that gives you confidence for Israel's future?
It's very, very clear what we've seen in the last 2 years. Whilst the Western hemisphere, the Western countries are trying to deal with the next generation of youth coming up, how they're involved in TikTok, how they're completely superficial, how they've basically lost their values. What we've seen in Israel over the last 2 years is that our generation Z or X or whatever you want to call it are lions. They can drop their phones at a second. They are there to risk their lives for the country, for the security of the country, to the reservists, leaving everything. There's one of these songs that I'm just absolutely enamored with is from an Israeli rap group called Tikva Shesh. They have this song, Giborei Al. It doesn't matter what you were doing before, who you were, what you were on October 6th. On October 7th, the bank manager is suddenly a sniper in Gaza. The insurance agent is now driving a D9. Everyone is doing something. The toy store owner is now a captain who's running a special forces unit. You've seen all of these amazing people getting up, leaving everything, and leading the charge forward against these genocidal terrorists to make Israel a safer place. And if that isn't all of the inspiration that the entire country needed, every day, all you need to do, just look at that. Just look at what these soldiers have achieved. If I can, on a very personal level, there's a book called October 7th, right? That tells different stories of different events. If you've ever thought about, well, what's going on in Israel? Who are the children that we're raising? Read the story of Anel Shapira. For those of you, that viewers of your audience who hadn't yet seen it, Anel Shapira was in that the mobile bomb shelter by the music festival with other people. The numerous terrorists were outside of the bomb shelter. They were throwing hand grenades into the bomb shelter, and Anel was picking them up and throwing them back. And until he succumbed, and like unbelievable bravery. These are the people that these are our children who we've raised, who we've taught, who are now the next generation going forward. That's our hope. And that is unbelievable for myself, unbelievable optimism in the future generations to know that these are the kids who are going to take us forward. These are the kids who are going to ensure and really set in stone the future of the Jewish people for another 100 years. And we have an amazing youth. And they have proved themselves to be lions and lionesses, boys, girls, every one of them. Something incredible. And that, I think, it doesn't matter did the mag lie? Did the mag leak something? These are all irrelevant when you see what amazing people this country has produced and just what they're willing to fight for, what their values are. That's our future. And it is very, very bright.
Wow.
Told you I didn't need a minute.
Right.
That's with me every single day, just looking at the inspiration that they provide us.
All right. Lieutenant Colonel Maurice Hirsch, thank you very much. And as always, I'm Yisrael Chai.